"Are you afraid that I'll touch you?" Alexander said with a devilish smile. His dark eyes glinted with mischief, a hint of challenge in his voice. He leaned slightly closer to Ophelia, his presence both intimidating and alluring. Ophelia completely ignored him, her face a mask of practiced indifference. She was looking out the window of the aircraft, her gaze fixed on the endless expanse of clouds. Her mind wandered far away from the confines of the plane, lost in thoughts she didn't care to share. Gradually, the constant buzz of the aircraft engine worked its magic. The monotonous hum became a lullaby, making her eyelids grow heavier with each passing moment. She fought against the tide of exhaustion, but sleep eventually won the battle. Alexander watched her, his expression softening from playful to tender. He noticed her head kept rolling off the backrest of the seat, threatening to wake her from her much-needed rest. With a gentleness that belied his earlier teasing, he carefully scooped her up in his strong arms. The movement was smooth, practiced, as if he'd done this 100 times before. He carried her into the cabin, his steps measured and quiet. Alexander laid her on the bed, his touch as light as a feather. For a moment he stood there, watching the rise and fall of her chest, a small smile playing on his lips. Then, reluctantly, he came outside to sit, leaving her to her dreams. It wasn't long afterwards, though, that Ophelia emerged from the cabin. Her movements were quick and slightly disoriented, hair tousled from sleep. She quickly sat down next to her husband, confusion evident in her furrowed brow and wide eyes. "How did I get into the cabin?" Ophelia asked, her voice thick with sleep. Alexander chuckled softly. "You were asleep," he explained, his tone gentle but tinged with amusement. "And you were sleeping like a baby. Your head was falling over the backrest of the seat." His eyes crinkled at the corners as he added, "You know, the kind of sleep where before you know it, spittle will come down your mouth. That's kind of embarrassing for you." Ophelia looked at him, her cheeks flushing a delicate pink. A mix of embarrassment. She poked her tongue out at him childishly. He laughed again, the sound full of genuine mirth and deep affection. Within a few hours, the pilot's voice came through the speakers, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "Mr. and Mrs. Prescott, we have just arrived in London. We will be landing shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts," Andrew announced. The couple exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. In no time, they felt the jolt of the plane touching down. It taxied smoothly along the runway before coming to a stop. Alexander held his wife's hand. His movements were protective, almost possessive, as he guided her down the air stairs to the waiting limo. Their luggage was quickly brought out, and the efficient driver helped to load it into the spacious trunk of the limo. Alexander, ever the gentleman, went to open the door for his wife. As she entered the car, he slid in next to her, their bodies close in the confines of the vehicle. The door shut with a soft thud, and the car moved off smoothly, whisking them away from the airport. Inside the limo, each person's thoughts were different, yet connected. They were both pondering the mysterious text message they had received earlier, its implications hanging heavily in the air between them. Ophelia turned to her husband, her eyes filled with a conflicting mix of excitement and worry. "Alexander," she said, "remember the text message I was sent?" She paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "It says a surprise is awaiting me, and I should be expecting it when I come back. What do you think it means?" Alexander's face grew serious. "Don't forget, I'm right beside you," he responded, his voice steady and reassuring. He reached out and took her hand in his thumb tracing soothing circles on her skin. "I'm with you, no matter what. Let's go home and face this together." By the time they reached the castle, as Alexander affectionately called their grand residence, the sun was beginning to set. The gravel crunched under the tires as their car came to a stop. "Finally," Alexander sighed, relief evident in his voice. "Home sweet home, my dear?" Ophelia smiled. As they stepped out of the car, servants rushed to their aid. Adrian approached them, bowing slightly. "Welcome home, sir and madam." They entered the mansion and went up their room. As they approached their bedroom door, Alexander turned to Ophelia with a smile. But as he swung open the door, his smile vanished. There, sprawled across the luxurious king-sized bed, was a woman in a silky nightgown, fast asleep. Alexander's face contorted with rage. "What?" he bellowed, causing Ophelia to jump. "What is this nonsense? Who is responsible for this?" he shouted. His voice echoed through the halls. "Lucas!" he yelled. Moments later, heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. A muscular man in a suit appeared, slightly out of breath. "Yes, sir. I'm here, sir," Lucas the bodyguard said. Alexander's eyes flashed, dangerously. "Can you explain this?" he hissed, gesturing to the sleeping woman. Lucas's eyes widened in shock. "Sir, I don't know how—" "Never mind," Alexander cut him off. "Just get her out of here, now. Carry her out if you have to," he shouted. Lucas hesitated, then entered the room. He gently shook the woman's shoulder. Ma'am, you need to wake up." At that moment, Alexander's patience snapped. "What did I say, Lucas? Or have you been paid to keep silent about this?" his boss asked. "No, sir, not at all," Lucas replied, fear evident in his voice. He immediately sprang into action, scooping up the now stirring woman in his arms. The woman's eyes flew open, confusion quickly turning to panic. "What? No, put me down!" she screamed, her arms and legs flailing wildly. "My things!" she cried as Lucas carried her out. "My things are in that room!" Ophelia stood frozen in the hallway, her mouth agape as she watched the scene unfold. Lucas carried the woman downstairs and out of the mansion, her screams echoing. "Vicky!" the woman yelled, her voice cracking. "Vicky, come out quick! Alexander has sent me out of the room!" From nearby, another woman emerged, shock evident on her face as she saw her friend in lingerie on the lawn. "Gloria?" Vicky gasped. "What on earth?" She rushed back inside, returning moments later with a housecoat. "What happened?" she asked, wrapping the coat around Gloria's shivering form. Gloria's eyes blazed with fury. "It's Alexander!" she spat. "He had the guards throw me out like yesterday's trash. My things are still in there," she yelled. Her voice rose hysterically. "That's our room, Vicky! The room where we made so many memories! How can he pretend nothing was between us?" Gloria's cries grew louder, directed at the mansion windows. "You don't have the right to marry anyone else, Alexander. I'm your legal wife. Everyone expects us to be together." Inside the mansion, when Lucas returned to meet his boss, his heart was pounding. "Sir," he said, his voice quivering with nervous energy. "She said that her things are in the room." He swallowed hard, awaiting his boss's reaction. Alexander's face remained impassive, but his eyes flashed with a mixture of relief and regret. He turned to Ophelia, his voice softening as he addressed her. "Ophelia, sweetheart," he said, his tone a blend of gentleness and urgency. "Please check if you find any female clothes that are not yours. Remove them, pack them, and give them to Lucas quickly." His words were careful, trying to shield Ophelia. Ophelia felt a knot forming in her stomach as she walked to the wardrobe. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the doors, dreading what she might find. Her heart sank as she saw a couple of unfamiliar dresses. With each item she discovered, shoes, jewelry, her confusion and hurt deepened. When she spotted an unknown suitcase, a wave of nausea washed over her. She packed everything with shaking hands, her mind racing with questions she was afraid to ask. "Here," Ophelia whispered to Lucas, her voice thick with unshed tears as she handed him the items. She couldn't meet his eyes, feeling a mix of embarrassment and betrayal. Lucas left quickly with the suitcases as he headed towards the distraught woman downstairs. In the sudden silence of the room, Ophelia turned to Alexander. Her eyes were pools of uncertainty and fear as she gathered the courage to speak. "Alexander," she asked, her voice barely audible, "are you sure you're doing the right thing?" Alexander's brow furrowed, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "What do you mean by that?" he asked softly, his voice laced with concern and confusion. Ophelia's lower lip trembled as she fought to keep her composure. "By marrying me, of course," she explained, her words tumbling out in a rush of insecurity. "Because that lady obviously is from your social circle." Her eyes searched his face, desperate for reassurance. Alexander's expression softened, his eyes filling with tenderness and a hint of sadness. He spoke gently but with conviction, his words aimed at soothing Ophelia's fears. "Ophelia, sweetheart, I'm not from any social circle, as you can see. Ever since you came here, have you ever seen any friends here? You met one of my friends, and you heard what he said? I am not from any social circle. I'm a loner." His gaze never left hers, willing her to believe him. Ophelia's tense shoulders relaxed slightly, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Good," she said, her voice stronger now, tinged with relief. "Now I know that about you." She felt a glimmer of hope, grateful to have learned this truth about Alexander amidst the chaos. Alexander burst into laughter. Ophelia found herself joining in, their shared laughter a balm to the emotional turmoil. "Come on, sweetheart," Alexander said, his voice full of affection and a hint of playfulness. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle and reassuring. "Let's change and go get something to eat." His suggestion was more than just about food. It was a chance to step away from the drama and reconnect. Ophelia nodded, squeezing his hand. Meanwhile, in Vicky's room, Gloria was still crying. "You told me that your brother would like me. You told me that my presence would send that woman away, but it didn't do anything. Your brother still doesn't like me. I don't know how long I have to wait for him to even notice that I exist. I thought you said this plan would work. To me, this is a total failure," Gloria said to her friend as she wailed. "Gloria, calm down. I have it under control. Don't worry, that woman will be out of this house sooner than later." "I have a plan," Vicky said, taking her phone from her bedside table. She dialed the number. "Hello? I'm ready to take you up on your offer."